Welcome back. All right. There are 10 players on the board. Why? Well, these are 10 players that, honestly, there isn't a video that I was able to throw together on any of the 10 necessarily. But these are 10 guys I wanted to talk about that outside of a News of the Day video, I don't really have a necessary reason to talk about these players. And we'll start off with the one whose jersey I'm wearing. I'm wearing a Jeremy Swayman jersey that I got years ago. So, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago, I was excited that Ottinger, Swayman, Demko, 3 good young goaltenders coming up for each team I cheered for. And I was excited. Now, Demko, injury riddled and still, going through it. Had another comeback last night. Ottinger's developed into, I think, a top 15 goaltender in the NHL. We can have the top 10 discussion another time, but I'll say top 15. And then Swayman's had his struggles this year. After some really good years, and his numbers have been fantastic up until this season. This year, 25 and 6 with an .892 save percentage. Criticisms of his contract are fair. Where I will stop short, though, is criticism of the player themselves or anything about selfishness and this and that. Because, honestly, most players are looking out for themselves when they get that new contract. There are occasions where a team may save some money because the player wants to take a little less so they can fill out the rest of the roster. There's the whole taxes argument, too. But Swayman, for me, is a great bounce-back candidate for next season. I still think he's a good goaltender, and we'll see if he's still a Bruin next year. I don't know what Don Sweeney's going to do this summer. I have no idea. I know that there's talk of like a quick retool here and rearming, and I don't know that this is a team that can do a quick retool. I think Washington's left a lot of teams going, hey, we could do that, when it's not that easy. Washington has had an excellent system for developing players in Hershey for a long time, and that's what we're seeing the fruits of with Washington. So while I see a lot of people saying, well, nope, they showed how to do it on the fly, no, they just brought up all these players that have been, plying their trade at the minors level and are pretty darn good players. So unless Boston has something like that on the way, I don't think they do. We'll see what happens with Swayman this summer. Tom Wilson. I wanted to talk about Tom Wilson for a simple reason. 69 games played, 31 goals, 28 assists, 59 points. He has 72 penalty minutes. That's tied for 19th. Wilson doesn't really have to fight anymore. Wilson just kind of has to come into a scrum and go, is everything here all right? And everybody's like, yep. Yeah, no, I was going back to the bench. So, later, Mr. Wilson. Wilson's contract was talked about as being a bad contract when he signed it. And maybe it's going to be a bad contract towards the end of it. But Tom Wilson has really reinvented himself. That 31 goals is ridiculous. I remember when he was drafted. And I thought to myself, this could be a power forward in the National Hockey League. He could end up being a pretty good point producer. And then it was all the fighting and the dirty hits and everything. He's really cleaned that up. He still throws hits. He's still a physical player. But I think Tom Wilson deserves some recognition for really cleaning up his game. And I think that's fantastic for him and for the Caps. When he was doing the things he was doing, I don't think he was helping the Caps at all. So, yeah, to the benefit of them, he's become a different player. Connor Bedard. A lot of people saying a lot of things about Connor Bedard. This year, 71 games, 20 goals, 36 assists, 56 points. He has a minus 38. That is the league worst in plus minus. He's still a teenager, and there's a lot of development I think that still needs to be done. Bedard, I feel like the sophomore jinx has hit him pretty hard this year too. The sophomore jinx is still a thing. And I think next year, with Chicago making the right moves this summer and the improvement that they want to make, I think Bedard's numbers will get better. I'm encouraged by what I've seen from Chicago this second half of the season in terms of their young players. And so I think Bedard will have a better next season. I think just that reset you get in the offseason is important. And then he won't be a teenager anymore. So I love people declaring a 19-year-old as a bust. Can't imagine that. You graduate high school and a year later, this guy really sucks. I don't think he's ever going to turn into anything. What? Anyways, Jonathan Huberdeau. Good story with Jonathan Huberdeau. Now, 69 games played with Calgary, 27 goals, 28 assists, 55 points. There are times where I think that Huberdeau's improved performance from last season might be overrated a little bit. Just a little bit. Just a tad. However, Huberdeau has kind of reinvented himself, not in the way that Tom Wilson has, of course, because Huberdeau was never one out there throwing, questionable hits and that kind of thing. But he's become more of a shoot-first guy. And he honestly has become, I think, a better player. Now, he's never going to score the way that he did in Florida. Those dreams and all those hopes are gone. But he can still be a very useful player. So he may never live up to that contract. So it doesn't mean it's not going to end up on the bad contract list. But playing the way he has this year takes some of the sting out of that contract and some of the sting out of that Tkachuk trade. Just a little bit. Just a tad. JJ Peterka. There hasn't been much in the way of bright spots for the Buffalo Sabres, but Peterka has been consistently dangerous. 64 games, 22 goals, 32 assists, 54 points. I've liked Peterka since before the draft. Go back and watch. I was very surprised Peterka dropped to where he did and Buffalo picked him. I thought, this guy's going to be good. And he has been. Now, I've got other ones wrong, but I can claim that, yeah, I got that one right. Peterka's been a very strong player for a Buffalo team that needs more players like Peterka. I thought about putting Thompson on the board because I wanted to restrict this to just one player per team. But I thought, we talk about Tage Thompson more than we talk about Peterka, and I think he deserves a little bit of discussion here. So 22 goals in 64 games playing with a Sabres team that struggles to score is impressive. Peterka should be a perennial 30-goal player once the scoring in Buffalo goes up. And hopefully Buffalo gets better. I know. It almost sounds like a mean joke at this point when you talk about Buffalo getting better. Matvei Michkov, 70 games as a rookie, 20 goals, 30 assists, 50 points. I mean, just for the fact that all of them end in 0, I had to put that one on the board. But Michkov's had a very good rookie season. Now, the reality is, it is highly unlikely he wins the Calder. But that's not the right thing to focus on. I've talked about this in previous years. The Calder Trophy's fine, and it's fun, and it's great to win it, but it doesn't necessarily indicate the best player in a rookie class. It just indicates the one that had the best season. Michkov's numbers are going to skyrocket when the Flyers have a team that can score. Michkov, I think, is going to be a star in the NHL. I think Michkov and Bedard, I think they're both suffering through very similar seasons with similar numbers on similarly bad teams. And when they played against each other, there was 11 goals in that game, because why not? But I do think Michkov's going to be a star. I think he's going to be fantastic. I do think Celebrini's probably going to be a better player than Michkov, but just Celebrini looks ridiculous. He actually looks better at this point than Bedard did, I think, last year. But that's the wonders of young players. You just never know. You just never know. Even Alexander Daigle, for all of the people who, what a bust. In his second season, he really didn't look like a bust. Daigle was producing just fine. Maybe a little below what people might have hoped, but it was a bad Ottawa team, and he was still productive. And then eventually we realized, this looks like a bust. Max Domi. Max Domi in Toronto, lots of attention for him. His father, Ty, of course, played for Toronto as well. 62 games, 6 goals, 22 assists, 28 points. Domi's an interesting player. He's very prominent for a guy who has 28 points in 62 games and only 6 goals. And he has a lot of opportunities, and he's snake bit. But it feels like that's sort of been the case throughout his career, where he's been snake bit on a production level. Outside of his time in Chicago, I really thought he was going to stay in Chicago when he was there. He did not. I think that with Domi, we're probably going to see his points totals always be a little bit underwhelming, comparatively speaking, to what the team might want, what we might want. But he does provide that certain something in the Toronto lineup. And so I understand why they kept him around. I would fully expect him to be back next year. His offensive numbers should be higher. I would say 40 points in 62 games would be more indicative of how well he's played this year. But it just feels like with Domi, if there's a goal drought to be found, it's found by him. And so that's where we're at right now. But still, useful player for Toronto, absolutely. Brandon Hagel. So when Hagel signed the extension he did with Tampa, there was definitely some, he's not worth that. Hagel might be one of the most underrated players in the National Hockey League. Yes, Barkov's name's on that underrated trophy every year since 2016, 2017. But Brandon Hagel has to be up there in terms of underrated players. 70 games, 32 goals, 45 assists, 77 points. And it was obvious when Hagel was in Chicago that this guy was going to be a point-per-game player and was going to be a very good player for a long time. I am still surprised Chicago traded him because Hagel's still young. That contract is pricey, sure, but he's lived up to it. And that's 77 points in 70 games. For a guy who almost never gets talked about, he's got 32 goals. He's not as flashy as some of the other guys. He doesn't have the household name some of the other guys do. But Yeah, Hagel's excellent in his own right. Jesperi Kotkaniemi. Kotkaniemi has not progressed the way that I think Carolina would hope. 70 games, 11 goals, 20 assists, 31 points. And this is the danger of offer sheets. We've praised St. Louis for the offer sheets to Holloway and Broberg. But Kotkaniemi is sort of that case of if you pick a guy up before he's really hit at the NHL level, you never know. And that $4.82 million cap hit doesn't look great. Now, Carolina, this summer, if they're looking to free up some money, buying out Kotkaniemi could work. Because if they buy out Kotkaniemi, I went through the tool they have on Puckpedia, it'd be an $841,333 cap hit until 2035. Now, that's a long time to be paying that out, but at less than $1 million to do that buyout, I would not be surprised to see that happen. Kotkaniemi's 24 years of age, so you get a much greater portion of that contract taken off your books if you buy them out. I think 26 is the cutoff when suddenly it goes from being 2/3 to 1/3 of the contract. But I think that if Carolina does that this summer, I would not be surprised because they're going to want to continue to be a contending team, and he's not producing the way that the almost $5 million cap hit would dictate he should be. Jackson LaCombe. So I wanted to round this out with Jackson LaCombe of the Anaheim Ducks. 63 games, 12 goals, 25 assists, 37 points. There were times last season where I was very frustrated by Jackson LaCombe. And I really didn't think that when Anaheim got better, he would be a prominent player on their blue line. I felt like, there's just so many mistakes going on with this LaCombe guy, and I don't know. I don't know if he's going to make it. And then, here he is. It's part of the reason why in videos, because I always get told, all he ever talks about is the players he likes. Yep. Because if I was on camera last year going, this LaCombe guy sucks, people would remember. People tend to remember that stuff. So I keep some of that to myself. But LaCombe has been excellent this year. 63 games, 12 goals, 25 assists, 37 points. If I hadn't already given his stats, and if I had, I'd given him twice. But LaCombe's been really good on an Anaheim team that struggles to score. So when Anaheim's offense gets better, LaCombe's numbers should go up as well. So if you're playing the long game with your fantasy, if you have a keeper fantasy league, Jackson LaCombe might be a keeper. He might be one to hold on to. And so I wanted to talk about these 10 players today. I could absolutely make this a weekly thing where I pick 10 players from around the NHL and we just have a discussion. So because not everything can be covered by a news video, not everything can be covered by me doing the team videos. So I figured isolate individual players from teams and have a discussion such as this. So let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.